You know,
Yeah.
Puerto Rico has one half of the per capita income of Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the United States. It has less than one half of that, and yet we're paying a 12.5% sales tax during the last three gubernatorial cycles. No, four if you include Fortunio. And Fortunio, by the way,
gave us
created more
story.
debt than any governor in Puerto Rican history. 14, he indebted Puerto Rico when he left us 14.5 billion just during his administration, which lasted only 4 years, one term. And then he goes up to Washington as a reformer and as a fiscal conservative, saying that Puerto Rico, must stop borrowing. Yeah, it is unbelievable.
And then, no, I was going to ask. This is obviously a famous.
Oh, Can I finish? Wait, can I finish? Sorry, that
Go ahead.
question. All right. So we went from naval coaling station, land, sugar, Operation Bootstrap, then the corporate, and then when Puerto Rico went broke with all the debt that it was accumulating, then the new wave is the creative financial instruments that have been foisted upon Puerto Rico. So that's the new forerunner of profit. And to give you an example of that, how that works, PREPA, which is the one agency that accumulated the greatest single amount of debt as an institution of that $73 billion debt. PREPA at one point over an 8-year period, there were 4 successive AA series bonds that floated the budget of PREPA. A
Could you
study
explain
was done.
what PREPA is, Nelson, just for our audience in case they don't know?
Yeah, sure.
What? Explain.
PREPA. Just explain that.
The Puerto Rico Energy and Power Authority. It is the it's the electricity company, the
NYPA.
Con Ed of Puerto Rico, and it's basically the only way to get energy, because people that do it with sun panels and alternative energy, they get billed by PREPA for the amount that they save. They have to return it to PREPA. It's unbelievable. And the meters, and then you have to install meters to show that, and you have to pay PREPA for the meters. And so PREPA runs on oil. The entire infrastructure it requires, and so it renders Puerto Rico subject to, dependent upon foreign sources for all its energy, right? And there were ways that for, and both political parties, PPP, PPD, and PNP. By the way, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one political party in Puerto Rico, the PLP, the party of lining their pockets. Yeah, because both of those parties were receiving subsidies, quote unquote. My finger is making air quotes, because those subsidies were bribes, so that they could that the energy companies, the oil companies, could continue blending non-compliant sludge, toxic oil with the EPA standard oil, and using that and spewing that into the atmosphere of Puerto Rico for over 20 years. This oil that was known to be toxic and carcinogenic, and it was known. They falsified 604 lab reports over a period of something like 10, 15 years. They falsified them and submitted them to the EPA. I mean, and you can't tell me that, people that, up and down the structure didn't know that this was going on.
Of course,
The top and bottom.
And even, Wanda, right? Wanda Vasquez, the famous FEMA lady, right? That's why she was, booted out of office, because she had the gall to take FEMA goods that were for people, in distress, that, that were, at death's door. Pampers, water, unbelievable. She filled warehouses of them so that she could use them during her campaign, her re-election campaign. All right. Well, she was in the Department of Justice of Puerto Rico as a lawyer during that period. Not once did she bring any of that up. No. So the whole infrastructure, the justice infrastructure, the legal, the regulatory, that was either in implicit compliance or receiving some benefit from it. All right, so that is part of how the debt of PREPA was built up, by paying for this illegal toxic sludge oil. Okay, so now the PREPA owes something like $8-9 billion. Okay, but this is what I'm saying is the latest evolution, as you said, that it would evolve. Right, that you say it's catch as catch can. The latest one is using these creative financial instruments to create debt, to get profit, and then stick Puerto Rico with the debt. And there were 4 successive Series AA bonds that were issued to PREPA over an eight-year period. 83%, 83%, remember this number, 83%. 83% of those funds were used not for the purchase of oil or for capital investment or research and development, payroll, or any of the ongoing physical operations of PREPA. 83% was used to pay, not even for payment on the principal of the antecedent debt. No, 83% of each one of those bonds was used to pay the interest
That was the
on the
VIG.
preceding bond. 83% to pay the interest on the preceding. So that's a Ponzi scheme. That's a Ponzi scheme. That's using one to create more debt, and just paying off the interest. And so, I mean, that is, and yet again, where has there been any oversight on that from the ECC or FINRA, or the Justice Department or the EPA?
Yeah.
Nowhere. You don't see that, right? You just see the debt at the end, and
And the people have to pay the price with austerity measures and
Exactly.
below national wages.
Closing schools, closing hospitals, right? Raising the taxes. At one point, for about 2 years, and I wrote a thing called "The Sharks Are Circling the Waters." It's currently, you can get in the Orlando Sentinel. Sharks are circling the waters in Puerto Rico. That in a 2-year period, 141 new taxes were created in Puerto Rico in a two-year period. And so that debt is foisted upon the people of Puerto Rico, and it caricatures Puerto Ricans as debtors when in fact they're the victims of this Wall Street infrastructure that's found new ways generation after generation, as you said, for colonialism and extraction. Right. And so I think that I'm really pleased that you fellows, father and son, are very clear in your understanding, your overall perception, and your underlying research. And I really commend you. I can see it from the flow of your questions that you guys understand what's going on.
Thank you very much. Daniel's got wrap up. A couple more questions.
Yeah, just a couple about him specifically. So after Albizu's death, the Puerto Rican independence cause continued. So by the late 70s, there was a new wave of Puerto Rican activists. Some of them being the FALN. They decided to kind of take up the mantle of armed struggle. So
and the macheteros.
But I wanted to ask you kind of how did they really kind of carry Albizu's torch, or was that different? And then my dad has a personal story about the FALN because they were in the Bronx where he was. But go ahead.
Well, my understanding is the macheteros centered in New Haven, and there was a good book. It was called Los Macheteros. I forget the author, but it was I think it was a PhD sociologist from the University of Connecticut. I don't. You guys have probably read it, or you're aware of it. The book Los Macheteros.
I'm not aware of it, but now I take a look at it.
It's a good one. It reads really well. Very well footnoted, and he apparently had a lot of personal interviews. He stitched together a lot of information, and
I'd like to read that.
Kind of. Yeah, it's called.
They were very precise in their operation. The macheteros, what they did was kind of incredible
and different from the FALN.
As precise as what was done at the Louvre, right? I mean, they went in, they knew what to do with Wells Fargo.
They weren't messing around.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that they showed through different ways. They showed up in Puerto Rico, and they distributed some of those funds. Unfortunately, at one point, I think they got caught because they wore like Halloween outfits or something, and they were giving away toys back in Puerto Rico. They started enjoying themselves. That is a template, and it's evidence that there is an awareness and a through line going on of. And what was the date? Am I mistaken in this? What was the date of the Wells Fargo theft? What? It might be on the anniversary date of Albizu's birthday.
They just one of them did something like that where it's the same.
Yeah.
Let me look at.
But to your question, yes, there is a. It can be a fine line, because there you can have some people that are a bit too fanatic and have their own sort of personal drive or personal demons, and then they attach it to a pre-existing.
Albizu's birthday. You're correct. September 12th. Albizu's birthday.
Okay. All right. So you have to exercise your own independent judgment by the action, by what they do, before, during, and after whatever they perpetrate,
Sure,
to see what their goals are. On balance, from what I have seen and what I've researched, or saying that there is a very strong connection between that, and that it is not as utterly self-serving as the American media would have us believe.
Right.
It's something that goes on, especially after that the FBI murders in Puerto Rico, right?
Right. Cerro Maravillas.
And the man they did that on the anniversary date of Albizu, I think.
Wow,
Yeah.
To bring it real quick, my dad knew. He stayed in the 1970s. He was kind of recruited at the Librería del Caribe. See? No, what is it called?
I'll tell that story.
Okay, you tell the story. The Radical Bookstore and the Rosado
on the
Brothers.
Lower East Side, there was I was became friends with a radical priest, and I was an organizer in the South Bronx on St. Anne's Avenue in the middle of when the Bronx was burning, and todo otro. And there
that was Luis Gigante was operating around that time. That's another type of priest.
That's a whole other thing, yeah. Pero there was. Do you remember the Dr. Silva? Do you remember hearing that name before?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
One of the ones. That's okay. The one of the guys who led the sterilization efforts on the island.
Oh wow!
And they brought him over to Segundo Ruiz Belvi's clinic in St. Anne's, and the people found out, and there was a huge commotion about it, and they eventually drove him out of there because of the connection between what he had done on the island and the idea that he was going to bring similar practices to the South Bronx was just unconscionable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
like Cornelius Rhodes, right? Like Cornelius Rhodes over in Puerto Rico.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know if you, during the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, were you aware of a bookstore, right? You remember the organization Cuando?
No. Maybe, but
you were Washington Heights guy. See, I'm more of a you were represented East Harlem, but I was also familiar with some of the people.
Was your bookstore the bookstore on 14th or on 23rd Street in that area?
Not that one. No, this was so I was part of the one of the committees to Free the Five, right? And back in those times, and
the Five Nationalists,
right?
For
obviously,
people that don't know. Well, for people
this
that don't know.
conversation, yeah. I'm sorry, and then I became acquainted with the Rosado brothers. Do you know? Do those names sound familiar?
Well,
Julio Luis.
I know of something from El Barrio, Felix Rosado and Gus Rosado. And
I know those guys, yeah.
And then State Senator David Rosado. Those are the
Right.
Rosados
No. There's a different.
There's Julio
There's a
Luis.
group. There's a group of Rosados that were, unbeknownst to me at the time, working closely with
lieutenants.
elements of the FALN, and they started a bookstore on right on Houston, and I forget which avenue.
What was the name of the bookstore?
Librería del Caribe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they started carrying like a lot of FALN Guerra de Guerrilla type of books and other books.
Che's diaries.
Some Juan Antonio Correger books, etc. But unbeknownst to me, right, these guys were kind of beginning to talk about the armed struggle, the importance of learning how to handle weapons and all this stuff. And I'm like, my 20s or whatever. And I'm certainly committed to, trying to free the five, etc. And then I used to go to like study groups in which we talk about
like book club.
National liberation, etc., Puerto Rico. And at one such gathering, one of the Rosado brothers gets a phone call, and it was at the same time that there had been the arrest of the
in Chicago.
Los Once, what ended up being called Los Once. I love the way these
the
these
5,
committees
the
always
11.
have a number, of course, associated with them. But that was another thing that I was kind of in the periphery of, and And I guess that brings me to a question that I have. Yeah.
The next day, the Rosado brothers were on the top of the FBI's most wanted list. The day after this
wow.
meeting, whatever. Yeah,
Okay.
Wow.
It's just
he was
one of
hanging out
those-
with them, and then it just.
And you know, I'll tell you the
Yeah,
truth, and this
pinched.
kind of goes back to something that you talked about with Albizu, and I guess we can close it up here.
Yeah.
But my father was a minister for years in El Barrio, and you know, back in the 50s, he was the one that was taking care of like people who were getting incarcerated or needed food or immigration problems, all that stuff. And there was kind of that, you know, that desire to follow Christian orthodoxy or Christian principles, but in a real way that really helped fellow Puerto Ricans and fellow Latino Americanos as they made the transition there. And I found myself at conflict because the nationalists that I came into contact with who were arguing for armed struggle, basically after Francis Tavern and after other incidents where people's lives
Four people
were taken, you know, you had to ask yourself, that's a real conundrum that you face as a human being as to whether or not the cause, as it were, will motivate you to kind of do, it's not the ultimate sacrifice because it's not you, but to sacrifice the life of another.
Valor y sacrificio.
Not exactly, but in the advancement of a cause. And so how do you think that Albizu must have reconciled or must have struggled with those two principles? How do you think that was ultimately resolved in his case?
Well, one thing that he, to his credit, is that he asked of no sacrifice of other people that he wouldn't undertake himself. And in the end, he made this, you know, underwent this great, tremendous sacrifice of being to all visible evidence being submitted to radiation, TBI, total body irradiation, to the point where he would wrap his head in towels, and they call him El Rey de las Toallas. And yet, you know, there's something that I've pondered is that, and that maybe reflects part of the blind spot of the times. If you think about it, the people that I think suffered maybe the most is his immediate family, his wife and kids, because when he graduated, he had even though he was a valedictorian of Harvard Law School, and even though they didn't give him the diploma there at the right, even though the valedictorian, he still got these tremendous job offers. He had, you know, a wide range of opportunities, and he forswore all of them to open up a one-man, basically a poverty law clinic in Ponce, right? And his children that were walking around in almost the same, you know, the same condition that he did when he was a child. So he and his wife, who had gotten a PhD in
biology,
sort of agronomy, you know,
biology maybe,
biology and she was from Harvard. She was the first Latina to ever attend Radcliffe.
Wow.
There was that historical element there. Anyway, she got offers, you know, like professorships at the UPR, and he told her, no, you won't. He affected her career. He said, no, I don't want you to have any relationships to the empire, so no, I don't want you to take that job. And so
That's deep.
he imposed himself, his will, on his wife, on his significant other, and on his children, and so in a very real material sense, so you could point to, you know, you could almost quantify the effect. It was on his family, and so, and I think that they suffered disproportionately in that, in a way that I don't think he was maybe really maybe he was, you know, I mean, the man was, you know, extremely thoughtful and conscientious. But it's something that, you know, that he apparently underwent and perpetuated it within his family. I think that he gave some of his comrades and his nationalist brothers more consideration than he felt that he was able to extend to his own family. And it is for that reason that at one point she moved back to Peru, and then ultimately she remarried, and so. I think he navigated it honorably, and the first one that he would take a hit would be himself. He would put himself in the line of fire, but you know, as a human being, I think that is one, and I'm trying to be perfectly honest and balanced in in my assessment, in my because I revere this man, as does anyone else that has a real consciousness. And maybe he thought that that this was a sacrifice that had to be undergone because on balance somebody had to do it.
Right.
So maybe and it could have been that by her taking a job there, UPR, that they would be able to extort, blackmail, influence, coerce, and in the public mind and in the view of his own nationalist cohorts, they will then say you're a hypocrite because you're saying you're a nationalist and your family is profiting from this from this very situation. So he was also responding to those constraints. So he was operating within a very narrow band of acceptable behavior. And to his credit, I don't think that he ever inflicted it outwardly. I think he bore it all privately. But I think unfortunately that his family suffered a disproportional amount of the sacrifice, and that's something that I've always thought about. On balance, I think he was as conscientious as he thought that he could possibly be about his life choices.
Okay, so thank you. So to close it out, there's a quote often attributed to Gustav Mahler that says, "Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire." And when
Where do you get all these things, man? This is all fantastic.
I saw that on Instagram. Honestly, I saw that on Instagram, something, Twitter or something. But yeah, and I think of that when I see Don Pedro's face on murals, Instagram photos, and T-shirts. That the movement he led largely was immobilized and rendered inert, so he became a symbol of anti-colonial bona fides or whatever. So as a final question, what do you think Albizu Campos' real legacy is today, and how can modern Puerto Ricans honor that legacy in a way that carries toward that fire instead of the ashes?
Well, the term "speak truth to power," could have been written, on his own gravestone. His legacy is one of unstinting commitment to a set of principles that are espoused to all of us, and so. I think his legacy would be of being willing to commit your life to the underlying principles upon which that life is supposedly founded, within his own ambit, his own. If you look at him, he was not just a Puerto Rican. He was an American patriot. He upheld the highest and most profound values upon which this country was built. And so I think his legacy is that of integrity and plain speaking, courage, and willingness to make ultimate sacrifices. He gave up his whole life, his whole career, and affected that of others. So his legacy is of sacrifice and belief and a lifelong commitment to your own values. And that's something that we could all. He stood up. Yeah. I mean, that's that is it's almost like definitional of what leadership is. It's someone that doesn't coerce you. It's someone that just inspires you to follow, and inspires your own curiosity and your own common sense, and the fact that his life and the searchlight that he created, it transcends time and space. It carries over from one century to the next, and it had to ripen like a fine wine in a forgotten basement. But at the end, people realized the quality of who he was and what he was living for, and the brilliance of his analysis. The things that he was saying are coming to pass right now, and so that is his legacy. Of common sense, sacrifice, and adherence to your own beliefs.
That's a beautiful way to end it. I want to just say on behalf of my son Daniel and I that this has been a tremendous conversation. I could honestly, this is no hyperbole, I could speak to you for much longer
10 hours
than the hour and change that we have, but I so appreciate your willingness to join us. And what projects, any that you'd like to mention that you're involved in now, or is it just doing what you are?
I'll mention one because it's important to me. It would be for me that sort of like the greatest accomplishment in my life. The book took off and found an audience that even caught me by surprise. And
Right.
it still has a resonance.
Absolutely.
There was a picture. There was a picture taken of Bad Bunny, who apparently was reading the book, and he was walking down the street carrying the book, and
No
someone
way.
took a
Ah,
and it came out
That's pretty
on
cool,
social
man.
media. And here's what happened. For the next 3 months, the sales of the book quintupled because of that one photograph, and it became
Power of social
and
media.
and I should use the word sales, the reach of the book, and so I had written the screenplay adaptation of some time ago, and I tried, and I didn't succeed, but now this is sort of like increased all over again. And so I feel right now, you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to reach Bad Bunny to see if he wants to executive produce.
Imagine him
Eso
playing
está-
Vidal
yeah.
Santiago or something. Vidal
Vidal
Santiago.
Santiago would be fantastic. It'd be fantastic.
Listen, when you start fundraising, man, I'm down. Put me down for a contribution.
Yeah.
I believe
Okay,
my
all right.
son's been talking about the screenplay.
Yeah,
idea.
before I even knew you were writing a screenplay, but because Gerson told me, I have 74 pages right now, something called Don Pedro. Name is Don Pedro. That's the name of the screenplay. But yeah,
Real original.
that's where a lot of my research comes from too.
But listen,
I
we're excited by the idea, and please, if anybody knows how to reach out to Bad Bunny, there's a hell of a book you need to push. It's again War Against All Puerto Ricans. It is as prescient and as valuable a
Relevant.
book as you will find today, especially on the question of Puerto Rico, but also really larger kind of universal and constitutional and themes. So thank you so much, Nelson, for your time.
My pleasure.
We like to say, as I sign all my emails with, Siempre pa'lante.
Siempre
Pa'lante
pa'lante.
vamos.
Okay.
Y pa'lante como elefante. Okay, guys, it was a real pleasure, man. Thank you, and this was an opportunity for me to reconnect with like minds, and it gives me a sense of reliving everything that I went through in writing the book. So I appreciate that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching the Vida Latina Upstate podcast, brought to you by Virtual Barrio Productions. And thank you to Excelsior Advisors. Follow us on Instagram at Vida Latina Podcast. That's Vida Latina Podcast on Instagram. Subscribe to this channel, Vida Latina Upstate Podcast, for more content every 2 weeks. And thank you to my dad, Dan Irizarry, and Siempre Pa'lante. Ciao.